quote unquote saw, and then he knows that they found these prints, and it's very convenient to say, okay, well,
supposedly he was one of the ones who found that first set of impressions.
Sure, and that's again fair, but
yeah,
easy to just fold it in one tiny detail from something later into your story.
Conveniently.
Yes.
And I say that word in capitals.
Mm-hmm.
All of this extra information from Peniston, he recalled while under regression hypnosis in 1994.
No.
Okay. That totally makes sense.
Yep.
No.
So, no reason to doubt any of that.
No.
He claims that the craft that he encountered was actually, you ready? From our future and not extraterrestrial. So it was human time travelers and not space aliens.
Listen, here's the only thing I want to say is that, like, look at the most evolved technology that we have. Just look at it. We don't make things in triangles, okay? Like, we don't.
Not
so,
yet.
So, like, well, no, we're never going to, because triangles are dumb.
We made pyramids.
No.
We did back in the past.
No, the aliens did back in the past, but I digress. I'm just saying, we make tubes because tubes are aerodynamic. That's what we do. We don't make triangles. Why?
So, there might be some reason for making a pyramid-shaped craft.
We talked about in the Montauk project is, you know, if you make them out of what was it? Special titanium or whatever it was that was supposedly that pyramid underground was made out of.
Yeah.
Maybe they warp and bend the atmosphere and you could make it in whatever shape you
I guess,
want.
or maybe triangles are actually more conducive to ripping holes in the space-time continuum. I guess that's fair.
Triangles go through time.
Yeah.
Squares and tubes don't.
That's why we don't build triangles. You're right. Okay, fine. All right, fine. They found out. They were like, oh, actually, triangles not great for space travel, great for time travel.
Here's the problem.
Hold on to that.
Here's the big problem.
Oh, okay.
Peniston's reports from the investigation that's been done, none of his reports support any of this.
Of course not.
That's right. He didn't say he'd physically contacted the craft or touched it or anything like that.
And Burroughs and Kamansag, or however you say that guy's name.
I think it's Kabansag.
That other airman that was with them, their reports don't support this either. Now, I will say that Burroughs, like I said before, his story has evolved, and it diverges from Peniston's. But they've both grown over time.
Okay, so I guess
there's been some flame wars between these guys about what they say they didn't and didn't see.
Well,
which is funny.
I just like to play devil's advocate, not devil's advocate, Peniston's advocate, I guess. I think there's something to be said for your want to, like, appear really normal. You know, I mean, I think especially if you're an airman and you've just seen some weird stuff, like, your report isn't necessarily going to be like, oh, and also they were time travelers, and also there were lots of weird hieroglyphs. You are going to be like, I'm totally normal and totally cool to keep serving. Don't worry about me. This is cool.
Well,
in reality, do I think that's what happened? No, I don't.
Actually, that's an extremely valid point. And you know why?
Why?
Is when you're a low-ranking officer, you write a report that you know your superiors are going to read and not call you a nut job and not kick you out and not get you in trouble.
Thank you.
That is actually a known phenomenon in military structures.
Yeah.
But when he recalled all this and he was talking about the craft and how it was from the future, did he ever say how he knew it was from the future?
No.
Intuition?
I mean...
Nope.
Yeah.
No. There's nothing to explain how he knew that. We don't know.
They weren't aliens. I think, like, that's part of it, right?
Uh,
They looked totally human, but it was a technology that you'd never seen before.
So therefore,
it must be from the future.
I guess so. So isn't he also the one that said that there were people with tiny little bodies and huge heads?
No.
That
is the fantastical internet version that I found.
Okay.
My favoriteest one on the internet that had the great illustrations of this triangular craft shooting little starlight beams out of it. And it was also on a black background.
There's illustrations?
There was on this one.
Oh my God.
It was a total Photoshop job.
How
It's
did
hilarious.
I miss that? It wasn't, like, painted on velvet?
No, it's not on velvet.
Yeah. So, but just to clarify this guy's version of the story, he didn't actually see any creatures, any human beings?
From his reports, I can't tell.
Yeah.
He somehow knows that they're from the future, but I can't get a clear bead on if he did or did not see people. And this is the problem, is that his story has changed over time. Mm-hmm. And it's evolved. And really, and I'm using him. I feel bad for kind of making him the whipping boy here, because he's just one of the ones whose story has changed. I mean, Burroughs has evolved. Halt himself has gone on record and made some claims about this whole incident. And so, I mean, these things just keep going. But we're not done with Peniston, unfortunately.
Oh, my God.
All right.
His story keeps going.
Ugh.
Okay, so within 3 weeks of their encounter with this craft, both Peniston and Burroughs are reported to have experienced difficulty walking, and this was from an inner ear and eye problems, evidently. And Peniston's gums turned white.
No big deal. My gums are white all the time.
Which, according to the article that I found this particular bit in, is a sign of heavy radiation exposure. I will tell you right now, I don't know how much time I spent trying to verify if heavy radiation exposure would change the color of your gums. I found stuff saying, well, yeah, if you're getting chemo and radiation, your gums are going to be tender, but nothing said they would turn white.
Yeah, I think that if he'd gotten enough radiation to turn his gums white, then he probably would be dead.
I was just going to say, there's like very limited research on intense radiation exposure, because most of those people just kind of die upon exposure.
They kind of do, yeah.
You die from heavy radiation poisoning.
Typically. Okay, well, let's go to 2 days after Burroughs and Peniston encounter this craft. They get whisked away to Langley by the CIA.
Oh,
right on.
That's not suspicious at all.
Yeah, they were interrogated for days, and they were told to give written accounts of what they saw and experienced. They then were given back those written accounts, and those accounts were altered or
edited,
sanitized, depending on how you want to describe it. And then they were told to memorize them and only tell those versions or else.
Right on.
I also have come across some stuff that says that while Peniston was at Langley, he was given truth serum, and I can't back that up.
Why not?
But it does. Here's the thing. Okay, let's just for a second, let's go down the rabbit hole of the CIA grabs these guys from a base in the UK, brings them back home, and interrogates them and pumps them full of drugs to try and find out what they know. Okay, well, if you're full of those drugs and you're high as a kite for days on end and you're being super interrogated, your mind is going to kind of go off kilter for a bit. Which to me is kind of an explanation of why he suddenly in regression therapy has these revelations.
Oh.
I saw these bright lights and there was these people. Well, it was because there was some dude with a lamp shining in your face while you were on all, sodium pentothal or whatever.
Although it did just occur to me that the stealth bombers that they developed, what are those? They
B-52?
Yeah, they are triangular.
Sort of, kind of.
But they're a big wing. They're flat.
Yeah.
Horizontally or vertically, for the most part.
Right. I'm just saying. It just occurred to me.
Yeah, and they're a lot.
I mean, I think it's like one thing to be like, oh, well, crap, maybe they're like actually it was Langley testing some, super secret something.
They do that at Area 51.
Usually, but like if they needed to take it across the sea or whatever, I don't know. Maybe it was the Brits testing something.
But it's a good thing to remember that this is 1980. We're still in the Cold War.
Yeah.
Things are still going on. A lot of clandestine.
It was the Nazi bell.
Yeah, it could have been the Nazi bell. Well, I know that the stealth technology was being developed back then.
Right.
It could have been prototypes, but even the B-2 bomber is pretty huge.
Oh, it's gigantic.
It's not 6 to 9 meters
No.
or 6 to 9 feet.
Right.
And the stealth fighter also is far bigger than that.
Right.
Honestly, when I see these reports and I listen to them, I have a couple of those little remote control quadcopter drones.
Yeah.
And they're covered in LEDs.
Mm-hmm.
And those things go all over the place and they flash and they are super agile. And it makes me think of those when I hear the reports about how these things move and people are chasing them through the trees. And if you've ever watched somebody who's got one of those that's got the live camera on it, flying it,
Oh,
they're
you mean
watching,
you? Yeah.
no, I don't have the fancy one. I've got the cheapo. I bought mine on Amazon for way cheap dollars. But what I'm getting at is, yeah, I know that was a great phrase. But what I'm getting at is I've watched videos of these guys with really expensive ones, and this is today. Those things are fast and they're agile, and at night, you have no idea what you're looking at. Because I've flown one at night in a field, and I could see how somebody would go, oh my gosh, it's a UFO.
Mm-hmm. That's part of the joy of it, yeah.
But the military's always playing around with that stuff, so it could have been something like that.
They could have had some sort of little drone thing, yeah, some radio-controlled drone.
Yeah, and we're kind of spilling over into the theories, which is great.
Maybe we just need to,
Yeah, I think we just need to keep going.
Let's just do it.
We jumped down the rabbit hole, so we're going to keep going.
We're falling down a rabbit hole.
So, yeah, so are we on to theories now?
The first theory that we've got is the Orford Ness Lighthouse.
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
That's kind of the one I'm leaning towards.
So we talked about this before. The lighthouse is 5 miles away from Bentwaters. It's out on the coast. Now, all of everything starts at Woodbridge, which is the southernmost of the twin bases. Mm-hmm. But Bentwaters, it's from Bentwaters, the lighthouse is directly east.
Okay.
Or no, I'm sorry, I've got that backwards. It's not. It's directly east from Woodbridge, and it's southeast from Bentwaters.
Got it.
Got them reversed there. There's a local forester, and this guy's name is Vince Thurkettle.
That's an awesome name.
That works.
It is. It's kind of a Viking name to me for some reason, the way it's spelled. But he says that he's pretty adamant about the fact that the lights that these guys saw were at the edges of the forest and appeared to hover slightly above the ground and move are from that lighthouse. At the time, the Orford Ness Lighthouse was the second brightest lighthouse in Britain. And it had, and if anybody's into lighthouses, you'll get this, but basically this means it's super bright, is it was 5 million candles.
Mm-hmm.
That's
a lot of candles.
Extremely bright. The lighthouse had a shield on the backside of it so that it didn't, light up the town constantly at night. Mm-hmm. But that shield only went so far. So from the forest, when you're to the south, you still see, or south of the lighthouse, you're going to still see the light. You just can't block it everywhere.
I get, my mind is going on this theory now, and, was the weather particularly different? I mean, would it explain why, on these two particular nights they would see these lights versus not after or before? I mean, presumably it's not just
it's not the weather
you
conditions.
just go out and you're just oh wow, that's weird, we never noticed that light before. It's totally normal now.
I get the feeling that these guys didn't go into the forest a whole lot.
Okay.
And the problem is this lighthouse is 5 miles away. So if you're in a depression, you don't see it.
Well, the other thing is...
Come up on a ridge and it's dancing through the trees. It's flashing by.
Well, the other thing we don't know is how long these guys had actually been at the base. So if they were kind of new arrivals...
They were all young men.
Yeah.
So I think the oldest of them was in his... I think Halt was the oldest, and he was in his early 30s. Most of them were 18, 25, somewhere in there.
Yeah, what I'm
so
saying
they're
is
American.
those are the only 2 nights that they were ever in the forest? Is that what we're saying? Because that's the only way that I could see this theory being plausible.
They had no reason to go in the forest otherwise.
Well, but did they not go back? I mean, was it not everybody was oh, hey, you know what? Let's go see if those lights are still there. I mean, that's, for me, it's okay, if we're going to say they were only there for 2 nights, that's fine. I'm willing to go with this theory. I like it a lot. If what we're saying is that literally the only time in the entire time that they were stationed at that base were the 2 nights, those were the only 2 nights they were in the forest, then That's all. That's the only way I can see this being plausible.
They have no reason to go in the forest. They have no reason to leave the base.
Sure.
And these guys are security. So they're U.S. Air Force security. Their job is to patrol the fence.
So we are saying that these would be the only 2 nights that they'd be in the forest.
Yeah.
All right.
I am.
I'm on
running
board
with
then.
that. Now, here's more damning evidence against them that it might have been the lighthouse is if you listen to the halt tape, somebody in the background, you can hear him say, "There it is again. There it is." And there's that break that I just kind of simulated there.
Of 5 seconds.
Of 5 seconds.
Oh.
Which is the same frequency that the Orford Ness lighthouse flashes at. Because, of course, every lighthouse has a unique pattern so that you know which lighthouse you're looking at from the sea.
Right.
And the Orford Ness was a steady light at every 5 seconds. If there was a UFO in the area, they should have said, there's a consistent blinking light off in the distance, and here goes that other crazy light. Do you see where I'm heading here?
Yeah.
Like, they should have described 2 lights at the same time. And in the tape, Halt describes the light as seeming to be red.
Yeah, that's not a problem.
The color red.
Yeah.
Well, potentially it's not a problem. Except for, when I did the research on the lighthouse, the bulb that was in the lighthouse at that time gave off a reddish-orange glow.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And they've replaced it since then with it's a mercury vapor bulb, I think is what it was.
I'm sure it was like
it doesn't matter what kind, but it actually still kind of has an orange tint to it, which I think is part of the class.
And when you see lights at that distance, often they look red. I mean, you just look at stars, for instance, right? Often the stars look red because of the way that the atmosphere...
The atmosphere also, might depend on how often they clean the glass. So
Exactly. Here's another bit. Halt normally worked out of Bentwaters and not Woodbridge. So from Bentwaters, where he is normally located, the lighthouse would have been to the southeast. But when he's at Woodbridge and he heads east into the forest, the lighthouse is going to be directly east of him. So whereas he's expecting to see the lighthouse south of him, it's not there. He's a little confused and thinks this foreign object is something crazy when it's actually something he should have recognized.
Got it. I like it. I'm on board.
yeah, I'm going with the lighthouse.
So we don't have to do any of the other ones, do we?
Well, we kind of do. And actually, I've got one more nail to put into the coffin of this.
Okay.
There is a guy by the name of Ian Ridpath, and he has done a boatload of research about this incident. And he, using the details that he could pick up from the case, from the tape, and from the records, he kind of tried to retrace their path through the forest. And he came upon what seems like a likely location, because there's a farmer's field and house directly in front of him, and it's in winter time, so there's no leaves on the tree. And off in the distance, through a break in the trees, guess what you see?
The lighthouse.
The lighthouse. Other thing, in the tape and some of the stuff, they also report seeing multiple stationary red lights. Well, also out on the coast is the Orford Ness transmission station. It's 2 miles up the coast from the lighthouse. It's 5 tall radio towers with red lights on them.
Oh, of course.
How do you know those radio towers aren't UFOs?
You don't.
You don't.
Yeah, or the lighthouse for that matter.
You don't.
You don't know. I mean, that lighthouse could be just a figment of your imagination.
Might
It's
be
just a hologram.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I know.
We got to
Seriously.
stop doing this podcast.
Well, let's go to another theory, which is that it is real aliens.
Ooh, I didn't know.
Equally as plausible.
No, I think it's more plausible.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, if it's real aliens, then what were they doing there?
Dude, does it really matter? They were aliens. They
Well,
can
it
do what
kind
they
of
want.
does, because this is kind of interesting.
They do what they want.
They were zapping our nukes.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because they had nukes at that base. So, yeah.
They did, because at that base, the 81st Fighter Interceptor Wing was housed there. The 81st Fighter Wing included, if you're into airplanes, you're going to dig this, It is the F-101 AC Voodoo fighter.
Although, okay.
It's a really fast plane with missiles.
Awesome.
The jet.
Cool.
Jet with missiles. Okay,
Yes.
well, this jet was set up to carry nuclear warheads, and they had two missiles that I found information about, which is the low-angle draft delivery and the low-altitude bombing system. Basically, these are not high orbit; they are low-altitude bombs. So basically, they're meant to be dropped from a jet.
Yeah, it sounds like kind of suicide for the pilot, though.
Well, that's the thing. These guys trained for long runs out from England, could potentially get into Russian airspace. In a retaliatory response, they would go and drop their nukes and beat feet and hope to get out of the way.
But know that they might not.
Well,
That's probably the point of the low-angle drogue delivery. So because that would slow its descent, give you time to beat
because
feet out.
it's a parachute bomb.
Yeah, it's a parachute bomb. Yeah.
Well, it's like the Osahagan Key.
The what?
It doesn't matter. It's a nerd reference. People will get it.
Okay.
It's like the Osahagan Key. I mean, it's like humanity's last, or America's last, like, salvation, right? It's that, like, during the Cold War, the theory would be that if, for instance, for whatever reason, the Soviets were like, all right, we're nuking America, America could send their last signal to their people in England and do that retaliatory thing, right? It's not meant to be survivable. It's meant to be
correct.
Kind of kamikaze.
Yeah, it's a last ditch effort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we know that there are nukes on this base. Halt and his men, when they give their reports of this craft shooting up into the sky and taking off, I don't know if you remember, I talked about they reported it shooting laser-like beams towards the ground. I don't know if I mentioned that part or not, but they did.
Okay.
And at one point, those beams that it was shooting hit the base or near the base.
Okay.
We don't know which it is, because this is just, again, this is one of those weird gray areas in this story.
Sure.
And like we just said, we know there are nukes on the base. There have been reports since the 1960s of unidentified objects in the sky beaming lights into sites that are known to house nuclear weapons all over the globe.
So the aliens are trying to protect us from ourselves.
Aliens are totally protecting us from ourselves,
all right,
so
I'm
that we
with
don't
it.
murder ourselves
Sure.
like dingbats.
Fair.
Or it could be. Are there any reports of this happening in Russia? Or
There
China?
there are reports all over the globe. So I did look around for some stuff, and there is on U.S. soil, and evidently there's some on Soviet soil.
Okay.
So it's not just us.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not them doing it to us either.
So we should probably pull a few of those things out of storage and test them.
Yeah, that was the one thing that I just kept wondering, going, so would they admit that their nukes weren't working anymore?
No,
or
God,
would they
no.
scrap
No,
them?
absolutely
Probably not tell us.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there's another aspect to this the aliens are real theory, and that would be the craft itself. Remember we talked about it, that triangular shaped craft that Devin was so up in arms about?
Yes.
Turns out, not the only time that kind of craft has been described. We all know, we've all seen the stuff that they're saucer shaped, they're flying saucers. But this pyramid shape has been described before.
Yeah, I'm not bothered by a pyramid shape as aliens. I'm bothered of a pyramid shape as time travelers.
Ah, good clarification.
Just to make,
That makes it all okay.
Actually, it doesn't really bother me for time travel. It's just like it's for something that's going to like move through the atmosphere. It really wouldn't be too aerodynamic.
Well, did you ever watch the TV show Stargate?
Yeah, occasionally.
All of their spaceships were pyramid shaped.
oh my God.
All of them were pyramid shaped. I can't even believe I went there, but I did.
You did.
I did. So let's get back to this. There's a reported case. This is in 1992 in a village in Cyprus, which is the island in the Mediterranean. A man said he saw a UFO at close range hovering outside his front door, and when he went up to the upper story of his house and he looked down on it, he described it as 3 meters per side. It was a low pyramid, and initially the size of the craft looked like hundreds of very small yellow lights, which turned to red before it gained altitude and shot upward like a bullet.
Okay.
So the point that I'm making is the pyramid is not unique to this story only.
Okay.
Stargate aside.
Okay.
And then there's the theory that, well, this just might set our conspiracy theory friends into fits. Because this whole thing could be one giant mix-up.
Could be. Or it could be some guys on mushrooms.
Also, yeah, bad
Could
slop.
be. Could be. Let's break through this, or walk through this thing, and look at the pieces of the puzzle that are here in front of us, because it kind of makes sense.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely it does. But
So let's talk about the landing site. There were those 3 impressions left on the ground.
Yeah, the rabbit digging, right?
Right. And I don't know if I mentioned, but I looked at the photos that were taken of the casts of those impressions.
You did not?
They look like nothing. They are just amorphous blobs in the ground.
Okay.
So
and were they at least consistent?
no.
Not at all?
No, they didn't look consistent to me at all. They look maybe an inch or so deep. They're very shallow. They're scallop shaped on the bottom. They're full of pine needle impressions. And the thing is that the photos of it are really hard to tell what they are because they're black and white photos. I've seen stuff that says that these impressions were made in frozen ground. I did look up the weather at that time in England, and the lows at night did go into freezing.
Okay.
So it's possible that the ground could have been frozen.
Or at least hard.
But it doesn't look like anything. But I've also seen stuff that said that those 3 impressions were equally spaced from one another. So 1 point something meters apart. So
9.8 feet apart.
yeah, so they're perfect triangle, which if that's really the distance, is amazing for it to have been animal diggings. But it does kind of look like it was just squirrels digging in the dander trying to find something to eat.
Yeah.
It could have been, it could have looked roughly triangular, but just random animal stuff.
Yeah, just very lucky.
Yeah.
The other things about the landing site is I talked about that there were some burn marks on the trees.
Those weren't burn marks, were they?
They weren't burn marks because what the locals would do is when they would mark trees to be felled and harvested, they would take an axe and they would scrape the bark and part of the tree, the trunk, the wood, away. Well, if you let enough time pass, enough sap is going to come out, and that's going to discolor in the air, and it's going to give kind of a burned look. I mean, if you've ever seen a tree that's got a big scab on it, and they just put out a bunch of sap, and it gets kind of dirty, and it gets cold, it doesn't look like it's just part of the tree. It looks like something else.
Yeah.
And if they're harvesting trees in that area, that explains why there's so many broken branches.
Yeah, man, it does.
It's a very simple answer there.
And looking at the pictures of that area, it's like this very convenient open little field area in the middle of a forest, right? It's
just a natural opening in the trees.
Yeah, it's just a nice little convenient, 9, 10, it's probably 11 feet by 11 feet wide. It's perfect for the 9.8 foot triangle to just kind of fit
Settle in.
And yeah, it's very convenient.
Yeah, they scoped that spot from across the galaxy.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah, that looks like the perfect
There it
campsite.
is, right there. Fits like a glove.
Yeah.
I had mentioned earlier that some of the soldiers had reported strange noises.
Yeah.
There were Burroughs reports, actually. He says there was a noise like a woman screaming, and that you can hear the farm animals making a lot of noise on those nights.
Oh, you mean like animals do?
Like actual animals?
That's
Like
not
in the
actually
middle
unusual.
of the night?
Well, here's the best part. In that forest, one of the creatures that is known to be in that forest, and I am going to butcher this pronunciation, so please help me out, is the muntjac deer.
That's how I would say that.
Close enough.
The muntjac deer, which is known for having a strange, loud, shrill bark when it's startled. I kid you not, they call it the barking deer.